Remember when I call this work session to order. May we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Truitt.
Here.
Vice Mayor Villanueva.
Here.
Councilmember Longabaugh.
Here.
Councilmember Alton.
Here.
Councilmember Williams.
Here.
Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Foro is absent.
Thank you very much. We'll move right to the item that we're going to be dealing with, which is number 2.
I'll go ahead and read that title. Discussion and presentation regarding the preferred alternative for the rehabilitation of McMicken Dam and current proposed alternatives being studied in the Whitman area master plan will be presented to council for comment, input, and questions prior to a public open house to be held on April 8, 2008.
Thank you. That was my speech. So I guess what I'll do is I'll just turn this over to Greg Jones from Maricopa County Flood Control District, who will be our first speaker. And we'll anticipate that it'll be about 20 minutes for the presentation, which I think will be very enlightening. And again, the purpose for this presentation is that we wanted council to have an opportunity to learn about this project that the city's been working with Flood Control District now on for quite some time, because there will be public meetings on this coming up, and we want to make sure that you have full knowledge of what we plan to present. So with that, Greg Jones.
Mayor and Council, Flood Control really appreciates this opportunity to do this presentation to you all. I know that a lot of you haven't seen me before. I've actually been in front of the City Council here a few times in, I would say, the far distant past. The primary purpose of this presentation is to make sure you know what our preferred alternative is for the McMicken Dam, and then I will briefly go over where we're at in the ADMP for the public meeting that's coming up. So I'm going to actually, let's see if we can get this thing to go, is turn this over to Mike Greenslate, who's the project manager for the McMicken Dam. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. The Flood Control District has been working on looking at McMicken Dam and alternatives for McMicken Dam for some time now. We started out with a study back in 2004, the Whitman ADMSU. And then most recently, our current study, Whitman ADMP, where we went through a series of alternative analysis, primary, secondary, and we're to the point where our team has recommended an alternative. The alternatives we've taken to this final study, there's basically 3, with one of them had several options, and I'll talk briefly about that. But first, just a real brief reason why we're doing this. McMicken Dam was built by the Corps of Engineers back in 1954. The dam design and technology was much different back then. McMicken Dam's purpose was to protect Luke Air Force Base and cropland, and it has a much different purpose now. We've been actively monitoring, maintaining, and keeping up McMicken Dam, but it is time to look at either replacing it with some other type of structure or rehabilitating it as a dam. One of the issues we've run into and we've been dealing with is land subsidence. The map here is that shows our prediction of future land subsidence over the next 100 feet of groundwater withdrawal. And what we see is that we have a bowl predicted in about where Sun Valley Parkway is. At the very south end of McMicken Dam, you'll see that we've actually had earth fissures occur there, and we've actually had to remove a part of our dam. That was a project we completed in 2004. This is our zoning of those of the area around McMicken Dam that's at risk of earth fissuring. McMicken Dam not only consists of the dam, it also consists of.
Get a little closer to the mic.
McMicken not only consists of the dam, which is about 9 miles long, it also consists of an outlet channel which crosses Grand Avenue and then discharges into a natural wash that ultimately discharges into the Agua Fria. And so we're looking at the entire system. We're looking at landscaping, theming, different concepts as part of that. We've gone through and assigned themes to it, and as we've gone through our alternative process, we've done that. We've come up with a multi-use concept for McMicken Dam, recreational, passive recreational corridor, an open space corridor with a scenic backdrop, in conjunction with the Maricopa County Parks and Trails. We've carried that forward. Well, first alternative was to, again, this is just a rehabilitation of McMicken Dam. What that is that's simply a, we raise the dam, and where we have earth fissures, earth fissures predicted or anticipated in the future, we construct one type of structure, and where we don't, we construct a typical dam type of structure. In all these alternatives, north of Sun Valley Parkway, we've determined that there is no alternative we could effectively put in place other than rehabilitate the dam. We've looked at channels and basins north of there, but the volume of inflow is just too great. South of Sun Valley Parkway, though, we have a lot of alternatives, a lot of options, and so we looked at those. One of those is basins, a series of basins south of Sun Valley Parkway. Again, the shaded areas you see down there near the bottom, those are our earth fissure risk zones, so we have to take special precautions there. It's a different type of design. And again, for basins, that's an expensive alternative. We look at, what we're looking at is we have a lot of limitations where we have the earth fissures. You'll see we have no trees or anything like that where we have anticipated earth fissures, and that's because we have certain structures that are buried in the ground to protect the area from the earth fissure. Another one is a channel to replace the dam. This one, though, would require us to go outside our property boundary, purchase some state land, and just to get the drainage, the flow to work, even with the subsidence taken into account. Again, some concepts we looked at. We're looking at different types of treatments for the earth fissure risk zones versus the regular zones. Then we looked at a combination of basins and channels. We put channels in where we have anticipated earth fissuring and basins where we don't. Again, some different concepts we looked at, taking into account the landscaping and the multi-use concept. Another alternative was basically to maintain as a dam, but to segment it. And this option allowed for roadway crossings, and we looked at segmentations at Sun Valley Parkway and Waddell Road. When we finally went through this, we realized that this is just an option to alternative one, the dam rehab, and so we parked this one to the side. This is something we can implement at any time if we choose alternative one, which is the dam rehab. Then just some concept of what that might look like, and for a roadway crossing of McMicken Dam. We went through a process of ranking, scoring and ranking. We looked at performance, risk, time and schedule, environment, landscape, cost. And as you see, our number one alternative, highest ranked alternative, was the dam rehab. A big part of that was cost. That option was about $91 million versus some of the others, which were much higher. Where we're at now, our study team has recommended alternative one that's a rehab of McMicken Dam. Basically keep McMicken Dam as it is, but design it to meet current standards and another life for another 100 years. Funding, though, is a major issue that we're dealing with. And so we've tried, I've been working with the Corps of Engineers to try to get them involved as a partner. We have an agreement with them. We have a study agreement with them, but they've not been able to fund their part of that agreement. The importance of that is the federal matching funds during construction. That's actually 60%. So we're still pursuing that, And until we exhaust that effort, we really can't move any further with this alternative, developing this alternative. If we can get the Corps involved, that's going to obviously involve more studies, and it could potentially lead to some other alternatives being considered. So it's important that we exhaust that effort. Right now, we have no partners. We're looking at maybe a phase construction if we can't get a partner, some support in that effort, and looking at different components that we'd build at different times as funding's available.
So basically, Mike was saying that the district at this point in time is proposing alternative one, but we're holding going forward because we're looking for funding. Just give you an idea, our capital improvement budget for the entire Maricopa County is about $50 to $60 million. That would take up 2 full years of all of our funding just for this one project. Within Maricopa County, we have, I think it's 27 jurisdictions, and everybody wants a piece of our money. I know that we're actually working with the City of Surprise on Reams Road down south. We just awarded a contract for about $6 million. So we're trying to finish obligation that we started with you guys about 5 to 6 years ago. Additionally, this actually affects Surprise. We're working in the city with the Loop 303. That's about a $140 million project where we're going to cost share with ADOT. So there's some potential also there to work with the city of maybe multi-use and some basins. I'm just trying to give you, there's a lot that we're doing within the city besides just the dam. All right, quickly, the Whitman ADMP alternatives. This study has been going on, believe it or not, since about 2004. First part of the study was at ADMS where we tried to identify some flooding hazards. In about 2006, that part was completed. We did some floodplain delineations. The city has actually went out and did some additional floodplain delineations. As part of ADMS, then we go into ADMP. The ADMP is actually how do we come up with some plans for the flooding hazards identified in here. There are some flooding hazards within the Whitman ADMP. So let's go through where we're at right now. Right now, we just got completed with level 1. I know this is not very clear. And what we're doing is we're moving forward. I'll do it from over here if you don't mind. Basically, we're right in here.
Just a second, we'll get you handheld.
Thank you. Basically where we're at is we're right here. We just got done with the level 1 alternatives, which is where we find all the hazards data collection that you heard me talk about. The study team came up with 5 brainstormed ideas. Then we've taken that to the stakeholders, which included members of your staff. We're in the process of revising some of the specifics with those alternatives, and we'll probably show those at a later date to you. I'm just going to describe them at the end of this presentation. And eventually what we're planning on doing is getting your input, another advisory committee's input, then eventually taking all that information to the April 8th meeting. So within the next 3 weeks, I have a lot of work to do. Just give you a rough idea of our current schedule. After that, we'll go back, look at those 5 alternatives, analyze them, basically do what you saw with the dam, figure out a way to rank them, and then move them back down. So let's go on where we're at. What we did is this is a very GIS intense effort, and we took a whole bunch of different layers. The things that we considered, which is very similar to what happened on the dam. We considered land ownership. We looked at land use. This actually comes out of your general plan and also Maricopa County's plan, because you guys don't have all this area, and also Peoria. We went in to try to identify the existing drainage problems, and you can see off of this map that a majority of the problems are along the canals where we show ponding, and also if you look at the red what they call the DEA thiowags or the blue lines are major drainage paths where we have some flooding. One of the major issues out there on those flooding here, let me go back to it, is roadway crossings. One of the major complaints that we've received in our previous public meetings was we can't get to our property or we can't get out of our property. So that's that, but there's also some others, and I'll show some of the flooding that's occurring out in this area. We also took into account landforms. We're trying to be very conscious of how we propose a project, and that'll be evident when I describe the 5 alternatives we're going to go forward with. We included scenic resources. This is how it looks. If you look out in the distant view, that mountain is beautiful. Or conversely, if we go look at maybe some of the sand and gravels, you might not say that looks too nice, but that's a matter of opinion too. Anyhow, we also considered some of the environmental. There's some wildlife corridors. There's cultural issues out here. So when we propose a project, and we're going to propose some basins and channels through this area, that we try to take that into account. And of course, the ecological too. We got to worry about the birds and the bunnies and wildlife corridors that I mentioned earlier. We incorporated your general plan, parks and open space. We included, you heard Mike say, the Maricopa County Regional Trail. I know that's incorporated into your parks and open space, along with Peoria's, and make sure that we try to look at that, see how we can actually help implement it. Mike was talking about subsidence with the dam. There's subsidence or projected subsidence in this area too. And you can see basically the epicenter. Right now, with our current study that's in draft, is showing about 8 feet of subsidence in that epicenter along US 60. So that actually is something for us to be concerned about with not only drainage but other infrastructure that the city, county, states would be putting in. Actually, I'm going to sidestep on the subsidence just a little bit, just to remind you, back in 93, Luke Air Force Base was flooded because one of the main channels, called Dysart, actually flowed backwards and helped inundate Luke Air Force Base. So subsidence is a big issue. All right. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry for interrupting, but I don't know what subsidence is.
Ground is actually dropping because of groundwater withdrawal. What happens is you take out volume of water, and that void, airspace in between there, collapses, and over time, the ground actually drops. So as you drive down Reams or one of these other roads, you'll notice these tall concrete standpipes. Some of them are painted white. Mm-hmm. At one time, they were, the very top of those were actually flush with the ground about 50 years ago.
How many?
About 50 years ago. All right. Here's some of the identified flooding hazards, some pictures that were taken. You can see this is a roadway crossing again. That's one of the big issues. We have a huge problem with sheet flow throughout this area, distributary flow, and alluvial fans. And I'll be happy to come back and take a couple hours of your time just on alluvial fans. That's a very unique hazard. As you can see again, here's some more of the flooding out in this particular area. Whoops, somebody couldn't get across. Some quick shots. And all these flood photos are actually in the Whitman study area. So I'm just demonstrating this has occurred, and you can see this was sheet flow in 2003. All right. Let me see that one again. Oh, I'm going the wrong direction. All right. Well, I guess we didn't upload my latest one. The alternatives, we actually have 5 alternatives. And on the 5 alternatives, I said I was going to describe and not really show them to you. The first one is, I'm going to call it the do nothing. All we're going to do out is go and finish the delineations. Right now we have about 2/3 of that study area delineated. So just do regulatory, continue on with the delineations. The second alternative is basically try to preserve the floodplains. And when we say preserve, that means try to either acquire or keep people out of it. The problem with that one is about 2/3 of the study area is in some sort of a floodplain. So it's going to be appropriate in areas, but it's not going to be appropriate throughout. So what you're sort of hearing me tell you is we're going to end up seeing a combination of these alternatives when we get to the final one. The second alternative is a multi-use recreational emphasis alternative where we try to locate basins and channels near parks and try to also help the trails and that other stuff. Majority of what we're proposing on that one would be along the CAP and also the MWD canal, where if I go back to all of them, they almost all have some sort of structure associated. If I take you back to the flooding hazards map, let me get back there real quick just so you can see it. So basically, a channel that happened as part of our stakeholder meeting just 2 days ago. There were some additional things, and that's why I'm not really showing this is we need to make sure that we include some facilities that help take care of the existing hazards. Like we know that there's some flooding issues with section 10 and 11. Martin Acres, I'm losing it, Circle City, Martin Acres. So those we need to make sure that we identify some sort of specific solution to move forward with as we present to the public. So those are being revised, and actually your city staff has PDFs, and hopefully it's helping us mark them up so that we can go forward with it. So far I've talked about 3: floodplain delineation, floodplain preservation, multi-use. Another one is scenic and environmental sensitivity. We'll try to maybe help maintain the wildlife corridors that the Fish and Game's tried to do, try to do the whatever facilities such that they enhance the character, the aesthetics of the area. Again, you're going to see a combination. And then the last one is basically floodplain recovery. That is probably the most structurally intense. If we're trying to reduce the floodplain, that means you're probably saying some sort of channelization or along those lines. I'm trying to visually describe it because as you see this existing drainage problem, that's what these alternatives look like. It's very difficult to see it. So unless I brought you a 6x6 map, it would be very difficult, and that's why I was describing it verbally to you. So with that, I was already down to the very end, which is with questions. Can we answer any questions for you?
Mr. Alton.
Through you, Chair. Right now, the dam is just nothing but levees or dikes, or it's on 3 sides, and it just kind of holds the water in. Or can you share that with me?
Yes.
How that works?
Mike, if I mess up, will you correct me? I'll take a shot. He's my expert. Basically, this is a jurisdictional dam. It meets every requirement of being a ADWR jurisdictional dam, which basically means that you have a certain height, I believe it's more than 6 feet of water behind it stored, and a certain volume. McMicken Dam in places is over 20 feet deep, and it stores many thousands of acre feet behind it. So it is a jurisdictional dam. There has been water stored behind it.
Okay, so we don't have any control mechanisms in which to direct the flow.
No, as part
What
of the
does it
dam.
just flow over the dike?
No, we
as it
actually
gets-
we have principal outlets that go into. Here, let me go to the very beginning. Got to go to his stuff. Let's see if I can just get one of these. All right, this shows it. No, let's go up one that looks nice. No. One more. All right, this shows it right here. Basically, what we have is McMicken Dam is from here to here. We have an emergency spillway that directs flows along this line and out. This is a training dike, or what we call the McMicken Dam outlet channel, that takes it over to the outlet wash that ultimately drops it into the Agua Fria River over in the city of, I believe it's Peoria. It might even be Surprise. I'm not sure the limits there. We also have some principal outlets that come in and dump into this same channel. So anytime we get water behind this dam, you'll see water going underneath the railroad and the road and going along this outlet channel and ultimately get over to the Agua Fria.
How often does that happen?
Anytime it rains. Once, twice a
Minimal
year.
rain?
We'll get a little bit. Mike, can you answer how often
how many-
we actually open the gates?
Well, McMicken Dam is an ungated structure, as there's an outlet at this point.
Right.
McMicken Dam can store up to about 20,000 acre-feet of water before it discharges over the emergency spillway, which is at this location. But what happens is it collects that water and drains it out there, so it's ungated, and we don't control it. It's not doesn't have any gate, so when it hits there, it drains. There is some storage that will occur, and there will be no drainage, but it's a 5-10 year storm, something like that. But the dam is designed to control anything up to what's called the standard project flood. That's what the Corps designated it as. It's somewhere between the 100-year and 200-year storm. So anything over that, though, would overtop the emergency spillway and would discharge out in this area. And so what our goal is to improve all those conditions, maintain them, look at how we look at the dam design technology that's in place now, and bring McMicken Dam up to that. Our goal is to make this a feasible structure for the next 100 years. That was the design intent back in the 50s, but again, it was for the agricultural land and protection of Luke Air Force Base only.
So given today, how many acre feet do you think there is in the dam today?
Storage right now is nothing. It's dry except for when it rains, and the dam can drain its entire pool, 20,000 acre feet, within 10 days.
And is it draining or is it going into the ground?
There's some recharge, but most of it's drainage. Our goal is to get it out of there. Part of that's vector control as well.
So, but it is filling up our aquifers as much as anything else is.
No, because most of the water hits to the Agua Fria. Very little is stored within McMicken Dam.
Okay.
It's not designed to be a storage reservoir. That's a different kind of structure. That's a different design. That has a whole different approach to how you build those things.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I have a question. Recently, I was told that maybe about 10 years ago, there was a plan to create a major recharge area and then a water park and have that be utilized by the residents of Surprise, and that Surprise maybe even leased some of that land from the county?
If I remember correctly, there was a lease and there was a recharge pilot project that was in place. We've talked about subsidence and earth fissuring, and part of the mechanism that drives that is groundwater, how it fluctuates, where it goes, and so to do anything like that, we'd have to be very careful in how we did it and where we did it. As for recreational uses, we're always open to those types of uses in the impoundment areas. There's challenges, there's things, design issues you have to go through, but we have other structures that have similar type of facilities, parks. There's a water park at one of our other facilities as well. So I mean, it's not something that we disallow, but there's obviously challenges.
Okay, thank you. We
Mr.
might
Chair,
ask
please.
staff at some point about the feasibility of that type of a project to see if it makes sense for Surprise. Mr. Johnson?
Through the chair. Thank you, Mayor. You mentioned something about 140 million cost shared with ADOT in regarding the Loop 303. That anything with Loop 303 should get all of our attention here. So what's going on with that? What do you mean? What's the situation with Loop 303 and the McMicken Dam? What's the correlation there?
The correlation between McMicken Dam and the 303 is that the 303 is protected by McMicken Dam. Other than that, the 303 and the correlation of McMicken Dam isn't. The reason why I brought it up was just to make sure that you're aware of the funds that we're actually expending up in this particular area. I wanted to make sure that you guys are aware that why the district is holding off and going and not spending $90 million tomorrow on McMicken Dam to rehab it. We're trying to seek partners. We're trying to seek federal funding like any good jurisdiction or governmental agency should do. Let's see if we can get the feds to help fund some of these projects. Matter of fact, McMicken Dam was originally constructed by the Corps, so there is a Corps nexus there. All right, on the 303, what I was just bringing up is flood control from basically, I'm going to say a little bit past Bell, all the way down to the Gila River. And this was part of another study area called the White Tanks, or also the Loop 303/White Tanks Area Drainage Master Plan, proposed a regional channel next to the 303. As part of that, the district is trying to move that forward with ADOT. We are at a conceptual agreement. It was taken in front of our Flood Control Advisory Board. They've approved our cost share out of that. And basically what we're saying that we would cost share is 21% out of the $140 million with ADOT picking up the rest. How we're actually doing that is we're proposing to operate and maintain a basin. I believe it's now located at Cactus up in the Surprise area, which is something that we'll be seeking to go and explore with your city staff. What should it look like? And then because of funding with 303, they have funding from I-10 North. There's a problem there in that drainage doesn't know that funding issue. They need to take their drainage all the way to the Gila, so we'll build the outfall and they'll build everything north. It's a very similar arrangement, believe it or not, that we did with you guys on Reams Road, where you agreed to build the facility within the city of Surprise, and we're building the outfall for you on Reams Road, all the way down to Falcon Dunes, that Dysart drain that I told you went backwards. But it's been corrected. We've since rebuilt it.
Thank you.
Mr. Villanueva?
Thank you.
Yes, through the chair. Did you mention something about raising the dam itself?
I believe there's part of this is a dam raise. Mike, do you want to address that?
As Greg alluded to, the dam is regulated by the Department of Water Resources, and to meet some of those requirements, we are going to have to raise the dam. It was constructed again back when the standards were much different. There's been, again, the subsidence where we've had some lowering. We raised it back in the 80s, and it's continued to subside, so we need to continue to raise the dam and address those subsidence and design issues. But yeah, that is part of the plan.
You do have regular heights through the bank. I mean, through the dam that you have to keep up. So you just refill that. Is that?
Well, it's. I wish it was that easy, but what we have to do, it has to be a structural component to it, and we're looking at raise the dam to address the future subsidence. We're trying to predict it this time, and raise it so we don't have to do it again, and look at what that maximum water surface elevation for what we call the probable maximum flood, the one that we can the extreme event. So we're going to be designing it for that. And again, our goal is to have a structure that meets all the standards, can last for 100 years, deal with subsidence, and all those issues.
You also mentioned about Luke getting flooded. What was the cause of that? Or will that happen again? Or
Well, actually, Luke was flooded twice. Once before the dam was built, and that's why they built the structure. I think in 1951 they had a 12-inch rainfall, a huge event. That type of storm that we designed for, and then not sure when the Dysart drain event happened, but subsidence had actually caused the drain to flow in the wrong direction, and so when it did rain, the water went into Luke instead of out of Luke.
thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate that presentation. City Clerk?
And the next item will be discussion and presentation on Arizona parkways.
Thank you. Dr. Mackey?
Mayor and Council, I want to make sure that Sunil got his carpet time in again here tonight. Maybe if I can just follow up briefly with this discussion on from flood control. Subsidence and related earth fishing are serious issues that we need to be aware of. I don't want you going home and having nightmares over this, but it is a serious issue, and water services and engineering are trying to keep on top of this, and also working with GIS to do any mapping. As near as I can tell so far, we don't have serious earth fissure issues anywhere in the Surprise area, except those areas that were just noted near the dam. But we are maintaining our vigil. In addition to what flood control is doing, we're doing our own area drainage master plans, our own long-range major street plans to try and take these washes into account. We're very sensitive to the desert character, and we're trying to design our future subdivisions, our future developments to fit in with the desert and with these flood areas. And lastly, I think Greg touched on it a little bit. We're very vitally concerned with the dam, not only for the work the dam would do in flood events, but also as we develop to the west, we're going to have to cross this dam with several major arterials. And so that's why we want to be involved in the dam design process so that we minimize the cost that it's going to take us to cross the structures. So I guess that's pretty much my wrap up for that. So I've given this presentation a couple times before on parkways, and I promise you I'll be very brief because it is somewhat repetitious for some of you, but I've tried to change this so that it will keep your interest. And also when I was asked to give this presentation tonight, I think it's very timely because there is a lot of interest in what we're going to talk about as far as the Arizona Parkway concept. And this is just our transportation plan map, and we wanted to show you the scope here. Basically, we're talking about the Parkway concept, which is, I'll show you a cross section in a minute, but we're talking about 163rd Avenue, 187th, 211th, 243rd, Deer Valley, Dove Valley, Jackrabbit, Jomax, and Sun Valley. Not all of these roads are currently in the city limits, but they're in our planning area. Total of approximately a little over 80 miles of parkway that we have in our transportation plan. So what's the problem? Everybody doesn't go straight. There's a lot of turns at crossroad intersections. So to provide all this left turning movements, we have special phasing. That special phasing eats up the cycle length. We don't have any time left for through traffic or very little time. We go to long cycle lengths, signal cycle lengths, and two-way progression is, even with all the ITS or intelligent transportation system stuff in the world, you simply can't define the laws of time, space, and speed, and two-way traffic progression is impossible. So what are some of the alternatives that have been tried over the years? First thing we did, which we do conventionally here in the valley, is we try and make sure that the left turns are opposing each other, like on the east-west road here, and then we have a special phase for them. The north-south road, if you will, here, there's not even a special headed-up left turn lane, so left turns from this crossroad would be very unsafe. This is something that we stopped doing probably 40 years ago in traffic engineering. This is an example of a way of avoiding the left turns at the main intersection by having them turn left in advance. They would turn left and come around here and then complete their left turn. Let's say if I want to make this movement like that, then I turn left here and come around. That frees this main intersection up to be only not have any left turn phasing involved. The problem is, of course, you're wiping out all this land here for development, and you're introducing a couple more signals, and you could end up with the same problem at this location. This is commonly called a jug handle, where the left turner is really a right turner down here, then makes his left here. That's got its own problems at this location. At-grade loops are tried. If a left turner wanted to go like this, he could take this loop, but as you can see, those eat up a lot of right-of-way, and the access to adjacent development is virtually impossible. So that's one of the reasons why this indirect left turn concept, primarily used in Michigan, is so attractive. That is, a vehicle going westbound that wants to go southbound comes through the crossover and then makes a U-turn and goes right. A vehicle on the side street going northbound wanting to go westbound is not permitted to make the turn here, but makes a right turn, then a left turn, a U-turn, and continues on its way. This seems like a lot of adverse travel distance, but we'll see in a minute it's really a lot more efficient. This is an example of the Parkway cross-section that was adopted by council back in December of '05. And the median here is kind of distorted scale-wise. This NTS means not to scale. It's already 60 feet wide, so it's a little bit of a not clear here really how wide this median is. But this would be the major arterial cross-section. This would be the minor. The primary difference here, besides the indirect lefts, is that the minor arterial right-of-way needed is 110 feet. The major arterial is 136 feet, but with the Parkway, we're looking at a 200-foot cross-section for right-of-way. I want to briefly go through these cartoons that I developed 25 years ago when I was working as a signal engineer in Michigan to try and explain to folks why signal spacing was so important. And this is called a time-space diagram cartoon, and the lanes at the bottom are the crossroad streets. The dark lines indicate the red of a signal. The clear space is the green. So as you can see, a vehicle traveling down the road here keeps getting green lights, assuming it goes at the speed that's represented by the slope of this line. So you've got time on the y-axis, distance on the x-axis. The slope of the line is the speed. And in this case, this driver is very fortunate because we timed the traffic light so he never has to stop once he gets started. Unfortunately, the driver in the opposing direction gets stopped just about every time. So that's what happens when you have poor spacing. It's almost impossible to progress both directions. But if you have good spacing, in our case, roughly a half mile, then with the cycle lengths that we would like to run, 80 to 90 seconds, you can get 40 to 45 mile an hour progression both directions. And that's important to us because as much as we think we have a lot of directional traffic where we could progress them in the morning down to Phoenix and progress them at night back home, we're just not finding that kind of patterns. There's not that big a split. So we have to be very concerned about progressing both directions of traffic. This is just a couple examples here of that shows the boulevard concept from Michigan. The distance between back-to-back between these crossovers is about 100 feet. And this is a very tough one to see, but the idea is we can use them both in commercial and residential neighborhoods. And these crossovers also facilitate pedestrian crossing because if you can see, and I'm sorry, I should have blown this up, see these sidewalks between the crossovers. That means that a pedestrian on the south side of the road can cross here using the crossover signal and then walk on the sidewalk and cross the other side of the street using the signal on the other side. And because those signals are independent, they don't screw up the progression for the through traffic. These are just a few examples of some real intensive commercial areas that are served by indirect crossovers and boulevards. This is a very popular one, Fairlane Mall in Dearborn. Another good one, 12 Oaks Mall in Novi. Notice these are all served by, at least on this road, by boulevards with indirect left turns. This is one from Marquette, Michigan, showing the flexibility. This is primarily a suburban area of one of the larger cities in the Upper Peninsula, but it isn't just in big metro areas. This also works in relatively lower density. I think there's only 300,000 people in the whole Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and Marquette isn't even really the biggest city. So this can serve in generally suburban areas as well as in urban arterials. And I'll close here just by giving you some results of a study that was conducted by McDOT. They hired a consultant to test out, is this indirect left turn boulevard concept, parkway concept, really beneficial? And they compared this roadway network. It's not necessary that you see it. Crossroads at every half mile. That was the network they tested. They loaded it up with traffic, and then while the simulation's running here, I'll give you some more examples about how these boulevards are very aesthetic, very pleasing in residential areas, in more dense commercial areas, even in some manufacturing areas, and some real heavy commercial areas. And this is probably the granddaddy of mall in Michigan, 12 Mile at Telegraph. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that density of the commercial and industrial area. Back to the simulation, this shows just how they modeled a conventional parkway. This shows how they modeled a parkway with indirect left turns. And the bottom line here from this research, that the simulation that was done by McDOT's consultant, Morrison Merrily, is that total delay was reduced 33%, stops by 21%, and travel time by 10%, and that even includes the adverse travel distance that one has to drive to the crossovers. So the bottom line is that the Michigan left turn carries 90,000 vehicles a day. The base network that we're using today conventionally carries 62,000, and the capacity is 40 to 50% greater using this concept. So thank you, and I'll answer any questions.
Any questions, Council? Thank you very much, Dr. Mackey.
Okay, thank you.
I believe that concludes our business, so this workshop is adjourned. Did you have a question?